It's a crisp, moonless night by the lake on the outskirts of town. The darkness here is nearly absolute. No streetlights, no glint of porch lamps, only the silver starlight dancing on gentle black water. I stand motionless among the pines on the muddy bank, just beyond the reach of the moon's reflection on the lake. The chill air smells of damp earth and moss. In the distance, a lone bullfrog croaks and an owl hoots from some far-off tree. Tonight, I have become a creature of this darkness. I'm dressed in black from head to toe. Black jeans, a dark jacket, gloves, even a knit cap pulled low. I blend into the silent woods, just another shadow among shadows. My heart beats slowly, steadily. I feel an eerie calm washing over me, as if my body knows what my mind has resolved. There is no turning back now. A strange sense of clarity sharpens my senses. The blood thundering in my ears has quieted, replaced by the subtle sounds of night, rustling leaves, water lapping at the shore, my own measured breaths. I have never felt so focused, so certain. Just a few months ago, I was a different man, trusting, content, maybe even a little naive. Now every nerve in my body is taut with anticipation, coiled with anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you reckless. No, what I feel now is cold, quiet rage, honed into a fine edge over weeks of careful planning. It sits heavy and solid in my chest, giving me patience. Tonight, it will finally be satisfied. Somewhere across that water is the lake house dock, a wooden pier that juts out into the shallows. In the blackness, I can barely make out its silhouette. I know every board of that dock intimately. I was here earlier today. I knelt on those planks under the afternoon sun, tools in hand, working diligently with one purpose in mind: to turn that dock into a weapon. Now I wait for him to arrive and step into my trap. Time drags, but I remain still, leaning against the rough bark of a pine. A few months ago, waiting like this would have set my heart racing with anxiety. But not tonight. Tonight I feel almost detached, watching myself from outside my body. My thoughts drift briefly as I count the minutes, and despite my resolve, I find myself remembering her face. The face that once gave me comfort and now only fuels my resolve. Her betrayal with him started all of this, set me down this path into darkness. If I allow myself to dwell on that pain for even a moment, I might lose this hard-won focus, so I push her image away. There will be time to think of Emily later after this is done. After both of them have paid, a soft vibration in my pocket startles me out of my reverie. I pull out the phone, the screen faintly glowing on my face for an instant before I shield it. It's her phone, Emily's. I found it abandoned and forgotten in her panic when she left. I've kept it for tonight. On the screen glows a simple text message. Jack, on my way. Can't wait to see you. I stare at his words for a long moment. Even now, even after everything, a part of me wants to crush this phone in my fist, grind it into the dirt out of sheer disgust. Instead, I swallow back the bitter taste in my throat and slip the phone away. He'll be here any minute. I crouch low, creeping to the water's edge for a better view. Sure enough, a pair of headlights appear on the narrow dirt road across the lake, winding slowly down through the trees. The beams bounce and flicker as the vehicle descends the rutted path toward the lake house. My pulse remains steady, even as a surge of adrenaline prickles through my veins. It's a familiar truck, a silver pickup I've seen countless times around town. Jack's truck. He kills the headlights as he approaches the clearing by the cabin. The crunch of gravel under tires carries across the still water. I slip back behind the trunk of a tree, careful to avoid silhouetting myself. The truck door opens and slams. In the perfect quiet, I can just make out faint footsteps on wood. Jack stepping onto the dock. It's too dark for him to see what I can see. The subtle sag in the middle of the pier, the way the boards are misaligned. He doesn't know where to tread safely, and why would he? Jack Mitchell walks through life as though nothing can touch him, as though he owns every damn thing. He thinks he's coming here to meet my wife. He thinks Emily invited him for a secret midnight rendezvous at this remote lake house, a place that meant something to our marriage once. He has no idea he's actually meeting me. I clench my gloved hands to stop them trembling, not with fear, but anticipation. From across the water, there's a sudden crack, the sound of wood under strain. It's louder than I expected in the nighttime hush. I hold my breath. There's a shout, Jack's voice, high and alarmed. What? No! The crack explodes into a splintering crash. In the dim starlight, I see the far end of the dock collapse, planks and beams dropping away into blackness. A split second later comes the enormous splash of wood and body hitting the lake. Then silence. I exhale, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My heart is hammering now. Did it work? I creep forward through the brush along the bank, trying to get a better angle. Across the water, the dock is half missing. Broken timbers stick up at jagged angles. And there, movement in the water near where the dock gave way. I see frantic splashing, hear gasping and choking. He's not dead yet. Jack is fighting. For a single heartbeat, I feel an urge to dive in to save him. Reflex from the doctor in me, the healer trained to preserve life at any cost. But that instinct has no place here tonight. Jack's life isn't mine to save. It's mine to extinguish. I force myself to remain still, watching coldly from the shadows. He's thrashing, trying to grab hold of something solid, but the debris is dragging him down. I know exactly what's happening. When I sabotaged the dock, I made sure of it. A heavy section of railing and part of the support frame would break free and fall right where he'd be standing. If all went to plan, that tangle of wood is now on top of him, entangling his legs, maybe pinning an ankle. Jack's choked sputtering devolves into panicked gurgles. His strength is failing as water fills his lungs. I see one arm slap the surface, weakly reaching toward the shore, toward me. I watch that hand flail and then sink beneath the dark surface once, twice, then it disappears for good. The lake returns to stillness, broken only by the soft creaking of the wrecked dock. My racing heart gradually slows. It's done. Jack Mitchell is gone. A strange emotion wells up in me then, unexpected and potent. I tilt my head up to the starry sky, gulping the cold night air. It's not triumph or joy I feel as I had imagined. Not exactly. It's more like relief. An immense weight that's been crushing my chest for months finally eases. In its place is a hollow ache and a grim satisfaction. Justice, my justice, has been served tonight. I allow myself a few more seconds to ensure the water stays quiet. No sign of Jack. He's not going to suddenly burst up gasping. He's sunk deeper, probably lodged in the muddy bottom by now, along with the ruined timbers. In the coming days, his death will likely be written off as a tragic accident. An intoxicated man who wandered onto an old dock at night. No one will suspect what truly happened, or who orchestrated it. My part here is finished. It's time to go. Still careful, still methodical, I retreat into the woods. I circle around the clearing where Jack's truck sits abandoned in front of the dark vacation cabin. I catch a glimpse of the truck's cab interior lit softly by the dome light. He left his door hanging open. A single shape glows on the passenger seat, a bouquet of flowers. I feel a twist of bitterness. The irony almost makes me smile. Jack brought flowers for his midnight tryst with another man's wife, and now those roses will be found wilted and drying in the morning sun next to an empty truck. Keeping a wide berth, I slip past the cabin and up the track. In the shadows beneath tall cedars waits another vehicle. A plain Navy sedan I parked earlier on an old logging trail. No one would have passed by to notice it. I open the door quietly and slide in. My body sinks into the driver's seat and suddenly I'm trembling all over, adrenaline releasing its hold. I did it. I actually did it. For a moment, my vision blurs and I clutch the steering wheel, fighting an onrush of emotion. Images swirl in my mind. Emily's tear-streaked face when I confronted her, Jack's smug grin the last time we spoke, the pitying stares of neighbors. Every sleepless night I spent plotting this, second-guessing myself, going over every detail. All of it has led me here. I take one last look toward the lake through the black trees, then turn the key in the ignition. The engine purrs to life. As I pull onto the narrow dirt road, I catch my reflection in the rear-view mirror. In the faint light, I see a man I barely recognize. Eyes cold and shadowed, jaw clenched, face flecked with dried mud and lake spray. Dr. Michael Lawson, the trusted small-town physician, is gone. The man staring back at me is someone else entirely. Someone forged in betrayal and pain. Someone who just delivered the final dose of vengeance. I flick off the interior light and drive slowly down the rutted trail, leaving the silent lake and its secrets behind. Now that the scales have been balanced, I can finally begin to bury the past. But to understand how I came to this, you have to know where it all began. Chapter 1. Before the Fall. 3 months earlier, Greenwood, Pennsylvania. I moved to Greenwood 5 years ago, trading the noise and neon of Philadelphia for the quiet charm of a one-stop light town. Greenwood sits nestled in rolling green hills, the kind of place where summer evenings smell of fresh cut hay and the whole town shows up on Friday nights to cheer the high school football team. With a population under 5,000, everyone knows everyone, or at least thinks they do. Back then, I was a young doctor fresh out of residency, eager to make a difference. The town's aging physician, Dr. Howard, had just retired, leaving a dire need for a new general practitioner. I still remember the day I arrived, the welcome sign on Main Street reading, "Welcome, Dr. Lawson," in hand-painted letters, and strangers stopping me on the sidewalk to shake my hand. I felt like I'd found a place where I could truly belong. Jack Mitchell was one of the first people I met. He was hard to miss, tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident handshake and an even more confident smile. Jack was about a decade older than me, and the de facto head of Greenwood's tiny medical community. He ran the Greenwood Family Clinic, the only clinic in town, and had been doing so for almost 15 years. He was well loved by patients for his easy manner and well respected around town for his generosity. In my first week, he took me under his wing, showing me the ropes not just at the clinic but in Greenwood's social circles. Jack and I became fast friends despite the age gap. He had a way of making you feel welcome, slinging an arm over your shoulder and introducing you to everyone as my new partner, Dr. Lawson, finest young doc this town's seen. Technically, I wasn't a partner yet, just an employee of the clinic on a trial year. But that distinction never seemed to matter to Jack. He made sure I was invited to every gathering, from Rotary Club luncheons to weekend fishing trips at the lake. It was at one of those community events that I first introduced Emily to Greenwood. She and I were newlyweds back then. We'd married just months before I finished my residency. Emily left behind her marketing job in the city to join me in Greenwood and embrace this small-town life together. She'd always been a free spirit, warm, artistic, with a smile that could light up my whole day. Where I was methodical and calm, she was impulsive and bubbly. We balanced each other. I'll never forget the proud glow on her face the day of Greenwood's summer picnic when I was officially welcomed as the town's new doctor. It was a sweltering afternoon in July. The entire town had gathered at Memorial Park under strings of red, white, and blue bunting. Kids chased each other around picnic tables loaded with casseroles and lemonade jugs. Mayor Thompson gave a little speech introducing me, and I remember looking out at the clapping crowd, sweaty and smiling. With Emily at my side, her hand in mine, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had everything I ever wanted: a meaningful career, a community that needed me, and the love of my life by my side. After the formalities, I introduced Emily to people as my better half and watched her charm them effortlessly. She wasn't a local, but within an hour she was laughing with the ladies from the church choir, as if they were old friends and offering to help Mrs. Donnelly with the upcoming charity bake sale. That was Emily, kind-hearted, eager to be involved, always ready with a gentle joke or a helping hand. Jack was at that picnic too, with his wife at the time, Linda. I recall the four of us sitting together at a splintery picnic table under the shade of an oak tree, balancing paper plates piled high with fried chicken and watermelon. Jack kept the conversation rollicking with his dry humor and larger-than-life stories of Greenwood's past. Linda, a quiet woman with tired eyes, mostly nodded along. At one point, Jack leaned over to me with a conspiratorial grin and said loud enough for Emily and Linda to hear, "Mike, if you ever need advice on keeping a wife happy in this little town, you just ask me. I've managed it twice, so I must be doing something right." I remember we all laughed. It was public knowledge that Linda was Jack's second wife. His first marriage had ended years before I arrived. Small towns have long memories, and I'd heard some gossip about how Jack's first wife, Diane, grew tired of the rural life and moved back to Pittsburgh. I never pressed Jack for details, and he never volunteered them, aside from a joke here and there to mask any bitterness. In hindsight, I wonder if that story was the full truth or just the polite version. Still, that day all I sensed was friendship. Jack was like an older brother to me in those early years, and to Emily, he was simply our gregarious friend and my mentor. I was happy that my wife and my best friend got along so well. I took it as a sign that we were exactly where we belonged, entwined in the easy, familiar rhythms of Greenwood. Life over the next few years settled into a pleasant pattern. Weekdays, I'd be at the clinic seeing everything from ear infections to stubborn cases of the flu, often with Jack in the next exam room trading corny jokes with patients. We made a good team. With two doctors, the clinic could treat more people, and we alternated on-call nights at the tiny two-room ER attached to Greenwood's modest health center. It wasn't uncommon for one of us to call the other in for backup on a tricky case. I learned a lot from Jack's clinical experience. He had a keen diagnostic intuition that I admired. Emily, meanwhile, found her own place in the community. She did some freelance marketing work remotely for former clients in Philadelphia, but mostly she threw herself into Greenwood life. She helped organize the annual Fall Festival, started a book club at the library, and even painted a mural of wildflowers on the wall of the local elementary school's cafeteria. She blossomed here, making friends easily with her openness and creativity. I loved watching the town embrace her as they had me. In the evenings, we'd cook together in our little bungalow on Maple Street and trade stories about our days. Hers filled with the latest town gossip or a funny incident at the farmer's market, and mine with the small triumphs and challenges of rural medicine. If you had asked me then, I would have told you I was truly happy. Sure, Greenwood had its quirks. Everyone knowing your business, the nearest decent restaurant 30 miles away, the unreliable winter power outages. But it felt like home. Emily and I talked about starting a family soon. I envisioned raising our kids here, Little League games, Christmas pageants, fishing on summer mornings, the works. Looking back, I can see little things that I missed at the time. Tiny warning signs, barely perceptible, that all was not as picture-perfect as I thought. For one, Jack's marriage to Linda quietly fell apart about 2 years ago. It barely made a ripple in our lives at first. One day, Jack announced over coffee in a resigned tone that he and Linda were separating. "It's for the best," he had sighed, forcing a small smile. "We've been drifting apart for years." Emily and I were stunned. We'd had dinner with them not long before and noticed no obvious friction, but Jack insisted it was mutual and amicable. Linda packed up and left town to live with her sister in Ohio, and Jack carried on as usual. If he was heartbroken, he hid it behind the same affable smile he gave to patients and friends alike. I remember Emily asking me privately if I thought Jack might be putting on a brave face. I'd shrugged and said, "He seems okay, maybe he's just not one to wear his heart on his sleeve." We sympathized, but soon moved on, not realizing then what that divorce foreshadowed. Then there was the matter of how busy Jack began keeping himself. After Linda left, he seemed to double down on work and socializing. He picked up extra shifts at the clinic and spearheaded new community projects, like fundraising for a new clinic wing and starting a free weekly health seminar at the town hall. He joked that idle hands were the devil's workshop, and he intended to keep his full. Frankly, I admired his energy and devotion to Greenwood. If anything, I aspire to be as indispensable to this town as Jack had become. But along with his increased work, Jack's old playboy tendencies started cropping up, or so I heard through whispers. Greenwood's grapevine might be mild compared to city gossip, but news still travels. There were quiet comments from a nurse, Sandra, that Dr. Mitchell had been extra friendly with one of the pharmaceutical reps who passed through. Someone else mentioned seeing him having dinner with a pretty blonde woman at a roadside restaurant a few towns over. I brushed these rumors aside as idle talk. After all, the man was single now. He had every right to date. He was only in his mid-40s, charismatic and still fit. It wasn't surprising that women found him attractive, and Jack never mentioned any new relationships to me, which I took as him wanting to keep his personal life private. That was fine by me. If I had been paying attention, I might have noticed a subtle shift in how Emily interacted with Jack around that time. Nothing overt, just... In hindsight, I recall moments when I'd find them standing a little too close while chatting at a party or laughing a bit too brightly at some inside joke. One night about a year ago, we had Jack over for dinner. I stepped out onto the back porch to fetch more firewood, and through the kitchen window, I caught a fleeting glimpse of an expression on my wife's face as she listened to Jack tell a story. She was smiling in a way that was more than polite amusement, her cheeks flushed, eyes glittering like they did when she was genuinely charmed. The look vanished when I returned, and I dismissed it as a trick of the light or my own misreading. I trusted both of them completely. Why wouldn't I? Emily was my wife. We had promised to love each other forever. And Jack was my friend who had done nothing but support me. If occasionally I felt a twinge of something, call it insecurity or jealousy, when I saw how easily Jack could make her laugh with a teasing remark, I buried it. It seemed absurd and petty to begrudge their innocent friendship. I told myself, Michael, don't be ridiculous. Jack's just naturally charming, and Emily is friendly. You're lucky to have two people you love who get along so well. So I ignored those stray gut feelings. I chalked them up to my own irrational fears of not being good enough. After all, Jack was a hometown hero, and I was still somewhat the newcomer. Sometimes folks in Greenwood still introduced me as our new doctor, even years later, whereas Jack was simply Doc Mitchell, as ingrained in the town as the old oak in the square. But Emily always squeezed my hand and rolled her eyes at those comments, reassuring me that I was every bit as valued. And Jack, he would brag to anyone who listened about how Dr. Lawson had saved this patient or that, always crediting me generously. I had no reason to suspect he harbored any ill will or secret desires toward my wife. No reason at all, until everything changed. It started as many affairs do, I suppose, with little shifts in routine and secrecy creeping in like a slow poison. At first, I hardly noticed anything amiss. Looking back, I can pinpoint the beginning of the end to one crisp autumn evening. October was in full swing, and Greenwood was alive with red and gold leaves swirling down Main Street. That night, Emily and I had planned a simple date, pizza and a movie at home. It was a silly tradition of ours since our dating days to have Thursday movie night, complete with buttery popcorn and cuddling on the couch. I arrived home a bit late from the clinic, having seen a last-minute walk-in patient with a nasty cut from a farming accident. I found the house dark and Emily not in the kitchen as expected. I called out, "Em, I'm home." A moment later, she nearly flew down the hallway from our bedroom, already wearing a light jacket and boots. "There you are," she exclaimed, a little breathless. "Listen, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you. I promised Claire I'd help her at the bookstore tonight. She's doing inventory and begged for my help last minute. Rain check on the movie?" She was flushed and avoiding my eyes as she fiddled with her keys. I remember blinking in surprise. "Oh," I said, trying to mask my disappointment. Sure, I guess the movie can wait." "I won't be too late," Emily promised, finally meeting my gaze with an apologetic smile. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge for you. Don't wait up, okay? I know you have an early shift." Before I could respond, she pecked my cheek and swished past me out the door into the dusk, leaving me standing there with my jacket still on and a bag of takeout pizza cooling in my hand. It was such a minor thing, really. People get busy, plans change. Yet as I ate slices of pizza alone at our dining table, a faint unease pricked at me. Emily rarely forgot about our Thursday movie nights. She loved them as much as I did. And why would Claire, who ran the bookstore, need help with inventory this late? The bookstore closed at 6 p.m. most days. I reasoned with myself that maybe inventory was easier after hours, or maybe Claire was behind schedule. I almost texted Emily to say I could swing by and help too. 2 sets of hands are better than one. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was the nagging sense that my help wasn't truly needed or wanted there that night. So I let it be. Instead, I cleaned up, then tried to focus on reviewing patient notes for the next day. But my concentration kept drifting, drawn back to the image of Emily rushing out with that oddly flustered look on her face. To my shame, a stray thought entered my mind, unbidden. Is she really with Claire? I felt guilty immediately, scolding myself for even entertaining such a notion. Of course she was. Emily had never given me a real reason to doubt her. Maybe the guilt I felt was actually because deep down I realized I'd been neglecting her a bit. The clinic had been so busy lately. We were short-staffed since our nurse practitioner left for maternity break. And I knew I'd been logging long hours. Emily hadn't complained, but perhaps she was lonelier than she let on, filling her time with extra activities like helping friends spontaneously. Yes, that made sense. I told myself I'd make it up to her. I'd planned something special for the weekend. Maybe a day trip to the city for a nice dinner or a show. To thank her for being so understanding of my schedule, I went to bed early that night, alone, the bed feeling unusually cold without Emily's warmth beside me. I woke briefly when I heard her come home. My clock read 11:23 p.m. I mumbled something half asleep as she slipped under the covers. She was shivering. Her skin felt chilled. "Everything okay?" I murmured, pulling her close. She whispered. Her lips pressed to my forehead and I caught a whiff of her perfume mixed with something else. a faint scent that seemed out of place, like cigar smoke, and a spicy cologne that wasn't hers. Before my groggy mind could puzzle through it, she curled into me and I let sleep take me again. In the morning, the scent on her clothes was gone, and so was any doubt. We slipped back into our routine. Emily joked about how sore unpacking boxes at the bookstore had made her, and I teased her that she was getting old at 30 to be complaining about back pain. We laughed. She kissed me long and sweet before I left for work, and that unease from the night before melted away in the light of day. I had no idea that in the shadows something fateful had already begun. The subtle lies and half-truths were accumulating, and my trust, so absolute, was quietly being violated. If I'd known then what I know now, perhaps I would have asked more questions, confronted those uneasy feelings head-on. Perhaps I could have been more vigilant, more careful. Perhaps I could have saved myself from what was coming. But I didn't know. I was blissfully, foolishly ignorant, and still secure in the belief that I was living a blessed life. In those early fall days, I was a man content with the world. It would not stay that way for long. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Facade. The little lie about the bookstore lingered in my mind, persistent as a faint ache. In the days that followed, I found myself watching Emily more closely than I ever had, an unconscious study of my wife's patterns. There was a time I knew them all by heart. Her morning routine of coffee, then yoga, in the living room, the way she hummed to herself while chopping vegetables for dinner, the way she'd drape her legs over mine as we watched TV at night. These familiar rhythms were still there, but now I detected subtle, dissonant notes. For one, her phone had practically become an extension of her hand. Emily had never been overly attached to technology. She'd often leave her phone buried in her purse or forget to charge it. But suddenly she was checking it often, thumbing out messages with a slight, secretive smile. If I happened to walk into the room, she'd flinch ever so slightly and tilt the screen away before meeting my eyes with a too casual, "Oh, it's just Claire updating me on bookstore stuff." Or, "Julie from the festival committee. You know how she is. Always some benign explanation offered a touch too quickly." Then there were the evenings out. In a town as sleepy as Greenwood, our social life was usually limited to predictable events. Friday night football games, church bake sales, the occasional dinner with friends. But now Emily was suddenly busy at odd times. Twice in 1 week, she dashed off claiming last-minute plans, a drink with an old friend passing through town, whom I'd never heard of before, an emergency meeting of the fall festival organizers. She gave me kisses on the cheek and apologies that felt rushed, almost rehearsed, each time leaving me alone with a lukewarm meal and a colder feeling of unease. After a week of this mounting strangeness, I decided I needed to either put my suspicions to rest or confirm them. The uncertainty was gnawing at me, affecting my focus at work. More than once, I caught myself rereading a patient's chart 3 times because my mind kept drifting back to Emily. The simplest first step was to verify the story that had started this spiral. One afternoon, I took a short break between appointments and walked 2 blocks over to Greenwood Books, where Claire's bookstore stood on a quiet corner. A bell jingled as I pushed the door open. The familiar smell of ink and old paper wafted out. Claire, a 50-something woman with cat-eye glasses and a perpetual pencil in her gray bun, looked up from behind the counter with a warm grin. "Well, hello, stranger," she greeted. "Dr. Lawson, finally taking a break to pick up something fun to read?" I forced a relaxed smile and approached the counter, heart thumping. "Hi, Claire. Actually, I came to apologize. Sounds like I stole my wife back too early the other night when she was helping you with inventory. I hope you two got everything done?" Claire's grin faltered in confusion. "Inventory? The other night?" I felt a cold prickle across my skin. "Yeah, last Thursday. Emily said you needed a hand here, so she was helping you pretty late." Claire frowned thoughtfully. "Oh, honey, I didn't have any inventory work last week. I mean, I wish I'd had her help when I did inventory last month, but the store's been closed at 5 every day this week. Maybe she meant some other night or another store." Her words blurred after that. I managed to nod politely, mutter something about a possible mix-up, and retreated before my face could betray the turmoil inside me. Outside on the sidewalk, the autumn sun seemed to spin. I stood for a moment on the curb, inhaling deeply, willing my racing heart to steady. So it was true. Emily had lied outright. She had not been with Claire at the bookstore that night. I tried to rationalize. Could she have simply used helping Claire as a cover for something innocent? Like planning a surprise for me? A birthday gift, maybe? My birthday was a month away. Perhaps she didn't want me to know she was meeting someone to arrange something. But why come home smelling of a man's cologne and smoke? My mind, ever trained to diagnose problems logically, was now connecting dots I'd been avoiding. Emily's odd behavior, her secrecy, the obvious lie about where she'd been. It all pointed to a singular, devastating diagnosis. She was having an affair. Even as the suspicion crystallized, I fought it. If she was having an affair, with whom? We lived in a tiny town. Everyone knew us. Emily wasn't making trips out of town frequently, as far as I knew. If she had found someone else, the pool of candidates seemed painfully small. The thought rose unbidden. Jack? I immediately rejected it, almost out loud. No, Jack was my friend, my colleague. He wouldn't. She wouldn't. The idea was too monstrous to entertain. Besides, wouldn't it be impossible to keep something like that hidden here? People would notice. Yet, hadn't I heard those quiet rumors about Jack's flirtations after his divorce? And hadn't I seen glimpses of a certain familiarity between him and Emily? Little moments I'd brushed aside. A joke shared just between them, the way his gaze sometimes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't looking. How had I dismissed that? I ran a hand over my face. I needed to know for certain, one way or another. Over the next few days, I became a silent investigator in my own home, half hating myself for it, but unable to stop. I started checking our phone bill online after work, something I'd never bothered with before. What I found made my stomach lurch. A spate of calls and text messages to a number I recognized, Jack's cell. Far more often than could be considered casual. Late-night calls when I was asleep or early morning messages when I was already at the clinic. They weren't on the printed bill for previous months. This was new. I also noticed a pattern. Many of those calls happened on evenings when Emily stepped out with those sudden plans. It was as if she'd check in with Jack before and after. One evening, I mustered the courage to do something I never imagined doing in my marriage. I looked through Emily's phone. My hands were shaking. She was in the shower. Her phone lay charging on the nightstand. Guilt and dread twisted in my gut as I unlocked it. She had given me her passcode years ago, and it hadn't changed. I navigated to her text messages, feeling like an intruder in her private world. Scrolling through, I saw lots of mundane chats. Friends, our neighbor about a recipe, her mom about weekend plans. Nothing out of the ordinary. My heart foolishly lifted. Maybe I was wrong. Then I noticed a thread with no name, just a phone number. Jack's number? She hadn't bothered to assign a contact name to it, or maybe she thought keeping it as a number was more discreet. The last message was from earlier that afternoon when I'd been at work. 555-2098. Miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same time, my place. 30. I stared at the text until the words blurred. My vision went red, and for a second I thought I might actually pass out. My fingers tightened on the phone. There it was. The ugly truth in plain words and a heart emoji. My wife and my best friend. Beneath Jack's message was her reply. Emily. Miss you too. Today has dragged. Can't stop thinking about last time. 3. I felt physically ill. I had to swallow down a surge of bile. Last time, what had they done last time? My imagination cruelly conjured images of them together. His hands on her body, her face tilted up to him. I sucked in a breath, trying to keep from shouting. The shower was still running. She hadn't heard me. Frantically, I scrolled further up, needing to see everything, though every word cut me deeper. Snippets of their exchanges painted a picture of intimacy and deception. A week ago, Jack, I love falling asleep thinking about you in my arms. Last night was incredible. Emily, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt you next to me. When can we have another night? I hate sneaking, but I need you. My hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I squeezed it hard to steady myself and continued reading. 3 days ago, the night she supposedly had drinks with an old friend. Emily. Leaving now. Thank you for tonight. I needed that. I feel so guilty, but with you it also feels so right. Jack, don't feel guilty, baby. You deserve to be happy. We both do. Get home safe. Text me when you're in bed next to him. And her response? Emily. You're terrible. LOL. Made it home. He's sleeping like a rock. I feel like such a sneak, but I'll dream of you. I could read no more. Some sound escaped me, a raw, guttural groan. I slapped a hand over my mouth as tears of rage and heartbreak burned in my eyes. It took every ounce of restraint not to storm into the bathroom and confront her that second. But a colder voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Not yet. Stay calm." I quietly closed the messaging app and placed the phone exactly as I'd found it. I backed out of the room on unsteady legs and went to the living room, trying to marshal my chaotic emotions. I needed a plan for what to say, how to even begin this confrontation. My thoughts were a hurricane: hurt, anger, confusion, a profound sense of betrayal unlike anything I'd ever known. A few minutes later, Emily emerged from the bedroom, hair damp and face flushed from the hot shower. She wore her cozy fleece robe and was toweling her hair. Seeing me on the couch, she gave me a soft smile. "Hey, you! I didn't know you were home. I thought you were working late." Her voice was the same gentle melody I'd known for years. How could she sound so normal, so loving, when just this morning she was arranging to meet another man? I realized I was just staring at her, silent. My heart pounded in my ears. "I left early," I managed to say. My throat felt dry as cotton. "Emily, we need to talk." Something in my tone caused her to pause mid-step. "Sure," she said slowly. She draped the towel over the back of a chair and came to the opposite end of the couch. Her eyes were on mine, open and curious, but I could see a flicker of nervousness there. "What's up? You look upset." For a moment, the words were stuck in my throat. I had rehearsed a dozen opening lines in those brief minutes. "I know what's going on. How long have you been lying to me?" "Why, Emily?" But none of them came out. Instead, my hand found my phone in my pocket. I pulled it out, opened the photo gallery, and wordlessly held up the screen to her. Displayed was a screenshot I had taken of her text exchange with Jack, specifically the lines, "I barely slept. I need you," with his name, or rather number, visible at the top. Crude, perhaps, but I couldn't bring myself to say it aloud. Emily's eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. In an instant, her face drained of color. She went very still, lips parted, a soft "oh" sound escaping. For a long, taut moment, neither of us spoke. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away with trembling fingers. "Michael," she whispered, voice breaking. This isn't... I can explain." "Can you?" I replied. I was shocked at how calm, almost cold, my own voice sounded, even as I felt my insides tearing apart. "Please, explain this to me, Emily." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, a sob. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders shuddering. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry," I repeated hollowly. I realized I was standing now, though I didn't recall rising. Some part of me noticed that my hands were balled into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms painfully. "You're sorry you got caught? Or sorry that you did it?" She dropped her hands, looking up at me with red, pleading eyes. "Sorry that I hurt you. Michael, I never wanted..." "How long?" I cut in, my voice sharp. The control was slipping. Anger was seeping through the cracks of my composure. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" Emily winced at my bluntness. She buried her face in her hands for a moment, then forced herself to meet my gaze. "A few months," she whispered. Since late summer." A hot knife of pain stabbed through me. Months. While I'd been blissfully unaware, thinking our biggest problem was my busy schedule, they had been... God. "Why?" The question came out raw, almost a shout. "Why, Emily? Is this my fault? Did I neglect you so much you had to run to him? Or was this just exciting for you, something new?" She sobbed harder. No, it wasn't like that. I mean, I was lonely, yes, but I never meant for it to happen. I didn't plan it, Michael, I swear. I never wanted to hurt you." "Lonely," I echoed bitterly. The word felt like acid. "We live in the same house, share the same bed, but you were lonely. So you chose Jack to fill that void? My friend, of all people." At that, she broke into a torrent of words, voice high and unsteady. "I know it was wrong. I know it. I tried to ignore it, what I was feeling. But Jack and we started talking after his divorce, and I felt so awful for him. He was hurting, and I was trying to be a good friend. We would grab coffee sometimes just to chat. I didn't think anything of it. Then over time, I don't know, We connected. We were both lonely, I guess. I paced away, running my hands through my hair as she spoke. I was shaking with adrenaline and grief. Part of me wanted to yell at her to stop making excuses, yet I also found myself latching on to every word, desperate for some reason that would make sense of this nightmare. Emily continued, words tumbling out in a rush. It was never about hurting you. I love you, Michael. I never stopped loving you. You have to believe that. I got in over my head. He listened to me. I was feeling a little lost. You were working so much. So it is my fault. I snapped, whirling to face her. I worked too much saving lives, so naturally my wife had to spread her legs for my colleague. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Don't say it like that, she cried. It wasn't just sex. I mean, it was... We did, but it wasn't just about that. I was emotionally... She stopped, realizing perhaps that explaining the emotional attachment was not, in fact, better. I laughed. A hollow, strangled laugh that didn't sound like me. Not just sex. Great. You fell in love with him then? Is that what you're saying? Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, fresh tears streaming. She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. My legs felt weak. I sat heavily on the arm of the sofa, staring at the rug. Unbelievable, I muttered. You and Jack. All this time. Right under my nose. How could I have been so blind? She crawled across the couch toward me, reaching out tentatively. I recoiled before her hand could touch me, and she withdrew, her face crumpling. I'm sorry, she whispered again. We never meant to. We didn't want to hurt you. You keep saying that, I snarled, snapping my gaze back to her. You didn't mean to, you didn't want to, but you did. Every lie you told, every time you snuck out to be with him, you were hurting me. You just hoped I'd never find out so you wouldn't have to face it. Emily broke into quiet sobs, rocking slightly as she hugged herself. I know, you're right. I was selfish and cowardly. I should have told you when I first felt something for him. Or I should have cut it off, but I was afraid and things just snowballed. And Jack, he told me. She paused, as if unsure whether to continue. My eyes narrowed. What did he tell you? She looked down. He said that maybe you didn't really love me anymore. You were so consumed with work. He made me feel like he was the only one who truly saw me and appreciated me. I know now that was wrong, but at the time I believed him. A fresh wave of fury surged in me. Jack had been poisoning her against me while I was oblivious. I stood again, unable to contain the restless anger. I wanted to put my fist through a wall, do something, anything, with the pain roiling inside. He manipulated you, I said through clenched teeth. And you let him. Jesus, Emily, he was my best friend. I trusted both of you. Did neither of you consider telling me you were unhappy, giving me a chance to fix things? She only wept harder, shaking her head. I don't know. I was confused. I didn't think straight. I'm so sorry. Her apologies were like throwing ashes on a fire. Useless. There was no putting this blaze out. It had already consumed everything I thought our life was built on. I realized with a kind of detached clarity that whatever we had, it was over. She had killed it, and so had he. A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by her quiet crying. My own eyes were dry now, a searing headache blooming behind them. I felt exhausted, emptied out. At length, Emily wiped her nose with the back of her hand and asked in a small, fearful voice, "Can you ever forgive me?" I stared at her, incredulous. The audacity of the question almost made me laugh again. Forgive? How could she even use that word right now? I don't know, I said honestly, my tone cold. I don't think so, not now, maybe not ever. She nodded miserably, as if expecting that. We both knew, even if we didn't speak it, that our marriage was effectively shattered. For a long moment, we sat without speaking. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the dining room, absurdly loud in the stillness. Finally, in a voice drained of emotion, I asked, "Are you in love with him?" Emily looked up at me, lips quivering. It took her a few seconds to gather herself enough to answer. I don't know, she whispered. I thought I was, maybe. It felt like something real, but right now I just feel horrible. I can't think straight. I closed my eyes, absorbing that. Part of me wanted to scream at her, call her every foul name I could think of. But another part, disturbingly calm, was already thinking of logistics, practicalities. Who would leave? Who would stay? How to disentangle our lives. She reached for me one more time, her fingers lightly brushing my forearm. Michael, I do love you, she said, voice aching. It's a different love, but it's still there. If there's any chance… I jerked my arm away as if her touch burned. Don't, I snapped. Just don't say you love me. Not now. She withdrew, crumpling inward. Okay, she murmured. Okay. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my chest. I think you should leave tonight, I said quietly. The steadiness of my own words surprised me. Go, I don't care where. Your mother's, a friend's, or… I couldn't even say his name. Wherever. I can't have you here. I need time. Emily's face contorted in pain, but she nodded. If that's what you want, I'll go, she agreed softly. I'll stay at my mom's for a while. It crossed my mind with dark irony that her mother lived 2 hours away. More likely she'd run straight to Jack. The thought was like salt in a wound, but I swallowed it down. At this moment, I just needed her gone before I said or did something truly unforgivable. I'll pack a few things, she said, voice barely audible. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I stood there as she shuffled off to our bedroom, and I listened to the muffled sounds of drawers opening, items being hastily thrown into a bag. I felt frozen, rooted to the living room floor as if by stepping away, I might shatter completely. She emerged 10 minutes later with a small suitcase and her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She had thrown on jeans and a sweatshirt, and I realized with a hollow pang that it was my old college sweatshirt, one she often wore to lounge in. The sight of her in it now felt all wrong. Emily set her suitcase by the door and then looked at me as if unsure what to do. I'm so sorry, Michael, she whispered again. I never wanted… Please go, I interrupted, my voice hard. I couldn't endure any more apologies. She swallowed and gave a tiny broken nod. With that, she picked up her bag and opened the door. The chilly night air swirled in around her. She paused on the threshold, half turning as if to say something else, but I had already looked away. A moment later, the door clicked shut behind her, and she was gone. I stood in the empty silence of our home for a long time, staring at the door through which my wife, no, ex-wife effectively, had just walked out of my life. The enormity of what had happened crashed down on me then. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. I'm not sure how long I sat there, tears forcing their way out despite my efforts to hold them back. All I know is that at some point that night, sorrow and shock gave way to something far colder and more dangerous. Anger. It wasn't the brief flare of temper I'd experienced during our confrontation, but a deep, smoldering fury that took root in my core. Anger at Emily for betraying our vows. Anger at myself for being blind to it. But most of all, anger at Jack Mitchell. He had been my friend, and he had seduced my wife under the guise of comforting her. He had exploited her vulnerabilities and undermined her trust in me. He had destroyed my marriage and trampled on our friendship without a second thought, all while smiling to my face each day at the clinic. As I sat alone in that dark living room, replaying every lie and every hurt, I swore one thing to myself: Jack would pay for this. They both would. I had given these two people my love and my trust, and they betrayed me in the cruelest way. There would be no forgiveness, no forgetting. What remained of my life now would be dedicated to making them understand the depth of their mistake. Emily might think my anger would fade, that perhaps time would soften me into reconsidering reconciliation. And Jack, in his arrogance, likely believed he would get away with everything. Maybe even imagined I would step aside quietly like a good loser while he played the doting partner to my wife. They were wrong. They had unleashed a darkness in me that I never knew I had. I would not lash out recklessly or let rage consume me in a way that led to my own ruin. No, I would channel it, control it. I would plan. Staring into the shadows of the house that had once been a warm home, I made a silent vow. I would take from Jack and Emily what they had taken from me. Piece by piece, I would tear down their lives and shred their happiness until they were left with nothing but regret. However long it took, however careful I needed to be, I would make it happen. Their betrayal would be answered with vengeance, and I would not rest until the score was settled. Chapter 3: Ashes and Embers. The rest of that night passed in a haze. I don't remember sleeping. I must have drifted off at some point in the early hours because I jolted awake to the gray light of dawn filtering through the curtains and the sound of someone knocking loudly on my front door. For a disoriented second, I thought it might be Emily coming back. My heart gave a confusing lurch, half anger, half an urge to see her face and demand again to know why. But when I stumbled to the door and cracked it open, it wasn't Emily at all. It was Bill Henderson, my neighbor and one of my oldest friends in Greenwood. Bill stood on the porch, in his pajamas and a bulky sweater, face etched with concern. He held two steaming paper cups of coffee from the diner down the road. "Morning, Michael," he said gently. His eyes flicked over me, taking in my disheveled state. Same clothes from yesterday, rumpled and hollow-eyed. "Figured you could use a strong cup?" I realized I must look a mess. My mouth tasted like bitterness and regret. I ran a hand over my face, feeling several days' stubble. "Bill," I croaked, voice raw. "What? Why are you—" He lifted the coffee cup slightly. "Saw your wife drive off late last night with a suitcase," he said matter-of-factly. "Then I noticed your kitchen light was on till dawn. I'm not the nosy type, but, well, Mary and I were worried. Thought I'd check on you." I opened the door wider in mute gratitude and gestured him in. The warmth of the coffee in my hand and the rich smell were welcome, even if I wasn't sure I could stomach anything right now. We settled in the living room. I realized distantly that this was the same couch where hours ago my life had unraveled. Bill didn't press me. He sat quietly for a moment, sipping his coffee, clearly giving me space to speak first if I wanted. That was Bill's way, patient and steady as an oak. It took me a minute, but finally I found my voice. "Emily's gone," I said flatly. Saying it aloud made it more real, and I hated the tremor in my voice. Bill nodded slowly. "I figured as much." After another sip, he added carefully, "Do you want to talk about it?" I stared into my coffee. Part of me didn't. What was the point of rehashing it? But another part needed to say it out loud, to confirm the reality. And if there was anyone outside my marriage I could confide in, it was Bill. In halting, quiet sentences, I told him the bare bones, that I discovered Emily had been unfaithful and with Jack of all people, that we fought, and I asked her to leave. The telling was strangely calm. My voice sounded distant in my own ears, as if describing someone else's life. Bill listened without interrupting, though at the mention of Jack's name I saw his jaw tighten, a flash of anger in his usually placid eyes. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "That son of a—" he caught himself, eyes flicking upward as if Mary or the heavens might scold him for cursing. "I'm sorry, Michael. I never would have expected that of Jack, or Emily." "Me neither," I said bitterly. I rubbed my temples, which were throbbing. "I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool," Bill said firmly. "They're the fools. And they're worse than fools for betraying you like this." I appreciated the solidarity in his voice. We sat in silence for a minute. Outside, a lawnmower sputtered to life on some neighbor's yard. Thursday morning going on as normal for everyone else. "So what are you going to do now?" Bill asked gently. I looked around the living room, the scattered throw blanket, the half-burned candle on the coffee table, an empty wine glass from 2 nights ago when life was still normal. It all felt like it belonged to someone else's story. "Hell if I know," I mumbled. "I suppose divorce is the obvious step." Bill nodded. "I can help you there. I know a good family lawyer in Harrisburg. We can get the ball rolling quickly, especially given the circumstances." He paused, then added carefully, "Pennsylvania's a no-fault divorce state, but evidence of adultery can still be useful for negotiating a settlement." "Do you have—" "I have evidence," I cut in, a hard edge creeping into my voice. My mind flashed with those text messages I'd read, each one seared into memory. "Plenty of it." "Good," he said. "That'll help ensure she doesn't contest anything. You shouldn't have to pay a dime more than necessary. And if you want to push for an at-fault basis—" "No," I interrupted. "I don't want a drawn-out legal battle. I just want her out of my life with minimal damage. Financially, at least." My words sounded cold, but that was the practical truth. I was done with Emily. Whatever love or sorrow was tangled up in me, I knew one thing with crystal clarity. I wanted to cut her off completely. Bill studied me quietly. "Understood. We'll aim for a swift resolution. Did you two have a prenup?" I shook my head. We hadn't. I was a young idealist when we married. The thought of a prenup felt cynical at the time. Now I silently cursed that naivete. "All right," Bill said. "Well, given that you've got clear evidence of her affair, she should be amenable to whatever terms we present. assuming she has any remorse or sense of shame. I huffed a humorless laugh. She's full of remorse now. Tears and apologies and all that, but I trailed off, not finishing the thought. But she wasn't remorseful each time she went to him. Bill seemed to catch it anyway. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Michael, I've been an attorney a long time. Handled more than a few divorces, even if it wasn't my primary practice. I've seen situations like this before. He frowned. It's always ugly, but I'll tell you what I've learned. You can't dwell on the why too much or it'll eat you alive. Some questions won't have satisfying answers. I swallowed, my throat dry. It's hard to not dwell on it, I admitted in a low voice. I didn't see it coming, at all. How did I miss all the signs? Was I really that absent? My mind was still torturing me with replayed scenes. Memories once sweet, now tainted by doubt. Were they laughing at me behind my back at those barbecues? Did every kind gesture of Jack's hide his guilt? Did each kiss from Emily hide her lies? Bill shook his head. You're doing the self-blame thing, aren't you? Don't. I've known you both since you moved here. It was clear as day you loved her and treated her well. She made a choice, so did he. That's on them. I nodded dully. People had been telling me I was a good husband for years, but it rang hollow now. We talked a while longer, discussing next steps. Bill said he'd call his lawyer friend by midday to start preparing papers. I'd need to provide whatever evidence I had and details of our assets. Luckily, you don't have kids to complicate matters, Bill commented gently. Small blessing, that. Yeah, I agreed quietly. I'd always imagined we'd have a child or two by now. Thank God that hadn't happened yet. I couldn't imagine the nightmare of trying to co-parent with this betrayal hanging between us. As we were finishing our coffee, Bill surprised me by placing a hand on my shoulder. One more thing, son, he said in a fatherly tone. I know right now everything feels wrecked, but you're not alone, okay? Mary and we're right next door if you need anything. And this town, Greenwood folks look after their own. You have friends here. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. I managed a stiff nod. Thanks, Bill, really. He stood up to go, giving me a long look. Take a day or two off work. I expect Jack can cover at the clinic. He nearly spat Jack's name, unable to disguise his disgust. Focus on yourself. And I'll just say this. Don't do anything rash. I know you're hurt and angry. Just promise me you won't march over to Jack's place with a shotgun or something, all right? It was meant as a half-joke, I suppose, but his eyes searched mine seriously. I forced a tight smile. Don't worry, I'm not about to land myself in jail for him. At least that much was true. I had no intention of doing anything that would jeopardize my own future. My revenge, if any, would have to be smarter than brute violence. Satisfied enough, Bill gave me a pat and left me with the empty coffee cups. Once he was gone, the house felt intensely silent again. I exhaled and scrubbed my hands over my face. There was a lot to do. Strangely, having a plan, divorce, legal steps, etc., gave me a small sense of purpose amid the emotional wreckage. First order of business. Gather all the evidence of the affair in one place for the lawyer. That meant printing out those texts and call logs. It was painful, but I did it methodically, like I was compiling someone else's case file. Screen captures of messages, a call history highlighting the frequent late-night contacts with Jack's number, even a bank statement showing an expensive hotel charge in the next county on a night she'd claimed to be at a friend's. I hadn't noticed that before, but scanning through our joint account statements, there it was. A 2D99 charge at Lakeside Inn last month. I knew that place. It was a cozy lodge by the state park, popular for romantic getaways. My jaw clenched so hard I thought a tooth might crack. More evidence, I told myself. More ammunition. By midday, I had a thick folder of printed evidence and a summary of our assets and debts typed out. It was more than a little surreal, compiling the end of my marriage like this, but it also hardened my resolve. Each piece of evidence stoked the fire of anger in my chest. I texted Bill that I had everything ready, and he promised to swing by later to pick it up and courier it to the attorney in Harrisburg. In the early afternoon, I finally forced myself to address the other big part of my life, my job. There were patients scheduled, responsibilities to cover. I was of half a mind to just let Jack handle everything at the clinic indefinitely, but I wasn't about to cede my professional ground to that bastard. Still, Bill's advice to take a day or two was wise. I wasn't in any shape to be making medical decisions right now. My mind was still churning with personal matters. So I did something I'd never done before. I called our clinic's receptionist, Martha, and told her I had a family emergency and needed her to reschedule my appointments for the next couple of days. I kept it vague, and bless her, Martha didn't pry. Greenwood might thrive on gossip, but she was a professional. She just assured me she'd handle it and told me to take care. I wondered if Jack had reached out to her already or to others. Did he know that I knew? Undoubtedly. Emily would have told him what went down last night. My stomach twisted at the thought of them together, huddling and panicking over the fallout. Good, let them panic. I was unsurprised then, when around 1 p.m. I saw Jack's name light up my phone screen. I'd been expecting that call all morning. I just stared at it as it rang. I had no desire to speak to him. What could he possibly say that I'd want to hear? An apology? A denial? Perhaps some pathetic attempt to justify himself or to beg me not to ruin his reputation. The call went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. A minute later, my phone chimed with a text. Jack, Mike, I am so sorry. Please, can we talk? I need to explain. Explain. The sheer gall of that made me want to throw the phone across the room. I didn't respond. A moment later, another text. Jack, I know you probably hate me and I don't blame you. But please, give me a chance to apologize in person. For all our years of friendship, I turned the phone off entirely. I couldn't deal with his self-serving pleas. There was nothing he could say that would make one damned bit of difference. I spent the rest of that day in a strange state of hyper-focused activity. I cleaned the house ferociously, stripping the bed of sheets that smelled of her, boxing up framed photos of us and shoving them in a closet, dumping out the half-finished bottle of her favorite wine. It was as if by scrubbing and bleaching every surface, I could scour away the pain. Of course I couldn't, but at least physical labor kept me from going insane. At one point, I even caught myself eyeing my old Remington hunting rifle in the spare room closet and imagining, just for a heartbeat, using it on them. The vision was so vivid it startled me. I pictured barging into Jack's house and pulling the trigger, a thunderclap ending it all in an instant. I slammed the closet door on that thought. No, that would be too quick and far too messy in every sense. I wasn't going to jail over those two. And a swift death for Jack would be too merciful anyway. I wanted him to suffer. Once the house was spotless and stripped of reminders, I finally collapsed into an exhausted sleep on the couch sometime past midnight. The next few days passed in a blur of formalities and carefully controlled emotions. Emily and I communicated sparingly via our attorneys. She agreed to every term without protest, no alimony, and even split of assets that left me the house and a larger share of savings, given her fault. We had no children, thankfully, and she didn't even contest giving me our dog Scout, knowing how much I loved him. In truth, I think she was too ashamed or guilt-ridden to put up a fight for anything. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she moved in with her mother in Pittsburgh, at least temporarily. So she wasn't with Jack under the same roof, at least not immediately. As for Jack, I avoided him entirely. I extended my leave from the clinic by another week, citing personal reasons. Whether he knew I had a dirt on him and was getting divorced, I wasn't sure. But in a town like Greenwood, he probably did. I imagined him coming to work every day, wondering if I'd burst in and publicly expose him or if I was plotting something else. Let him wonder. I maintained radio silence. I did hear from Martha that he was looking worse by the day. Gaunt, bloodshot eyes, unusually quiet. Good. Guilt was eating at him and possibly fear of consequences, as it should. When I did finally return to work on a Monday, 2 weeks after our confrontation, the atmosphere in Greenwood Clinic was palpably tense. People knew, as they always do. There were sympathetic looks cast my way, awkward silences when I entered a room where staff had been whispering. Greenwood's gossip mill had clearly been churning. I held my head high and acted as normal as possible, refusing to give anyone a show of drama. Jack tried to speak to me that first day. I shut him down with an icy glare and a curt, "Not here, not ever. Keep it professional, Dr. Mitchell?" He looked stricken, but he obeyed. From then on, we communicated only if absolutely necessary about patient matters, and even then in clipped, formal tones. The entire clinic walked on eggshells around us. I could feel eyes on us whenever we passed in the hallway. Small towns have a way of unspoken collective judgment. By the end of that week, Several of Jack's longtime patients had quietly transferred to my roster or outright requested I handle their care from now on. The staff, too, Martha the receptionist, Sandra the head nurse, rallied subtly around me. Their greetings to him were politely cool, whereas with me they were warm and solicitous, asking how I was holding up. It was clear Jack's reputation had taken a massive hit. Outside of work, I noticed he was no longer at the usual diner for breakfast or at Rotary meetings. Someone mentioned seeing him alone at the bar out by the highway a few nights in a row, nursing bourbons. Rumors even floated that he might resign or move away to escape the shame. Emily was nowhere to be seen around town, and speculation ran wild about whether she'd come back or if their fling had already fizzled under the weight of what it cost. All of that should have given me satisfaction, and to a degree it did. Watching Jack shuffle through the clinic halls with hollow eyes and a slumped posture, or hearing how neighbors now avoided making small talk with him in the grocery store was gratifying. Piece by piece, he was reaping what he'd sown. Emily, too, though absent, was the subject of scornful talk. Imagine doing that to poor Michael. I never would have thought, but you never know people, do you? My wrath, it seemed, was being answered by the universe. Yet I felt no peace. In quiet moments, the rage still simmered, unsatisfied. The legal maneuvers, divorce, asset division, were done. The psychological games, community ostracism, cold shoulder at work, were in full swing. I had even implicitly blackmailed Jack one day by mentioning I had plenty of evidence if I did ever want to sue or report him to the medical board for misconduct. The look on his face was almost fearful. Almost. And still, it wasn't enough. Perhaps it was the fact that they still had each other, theoretically. True, I suspected things were strained between them now. People like Jack and Emily, thrown together by lust and secrecy, often falter when confronted with reality. I doubted their great romance was faring well under guilt, grief, and small-town shaming. But the possibility that they might eventually shrug this off and try to build a life together, elsewhere perhaps, gnawed at me like rats in the walls. The thought of them getting a second chance, finding comfort in each other after destroying me, was intolerable. My darkest impulses began to whisper late at night as I lay alone in my once warm bed. They don't deserve a happy ending. They don't deserve any ending except ruin. More than once I dreamed of outright violence. In one vivid nightmare, I was holding my hunting rifle, pointing it at a faceless man and woman who cowered before me. I woke from that dream with my heart pounding not in fear, but in longing. Firing that gun in the dream had felt good. I started thinking, maybe I had been too quick to dismiss a more permanent solution. No, I wouldn't shoot them in broad daylight or do anything obviously criminal. I was angry, not stupid. But accidents happen. People die unexpectedly all the time, and a doctor with a cunning mind might well arrange an accident that no one ever suspects. Once the idea took hold, it wouldn't let go. At first, I tried to resist it. Planning an accident, let's call it what it would be, a murder, was crossing a line that would forever separate me from the man I used to be. But hadn't that man already been destroyed? Jack and Emily had seen to that. Over endless cups of late-night coffee and through many insomnia-fueled walks in the woods behind my house, I began sketching out the ultimate revenge in my mind. Jack's life was already in freefall. I could nudge it over the edge. If he died, especially in a way that might implicate Emily or at least torment her with guilt, it would be complete. Both of them, utterly destroyed. He in the ground, and she left with nothing but the ashes of what she'd done. It would have to be subtle. The plan would need to look exactly like what it should, a terrible twist of fate. Fortunately, fate was already tempting Jack. I overheard him telling Sandra that he planned to spend Christmas weekend out at his lake cabin. He even half-heartedly invited me, out of habit or guilt, who knows, by mumbling something about, if you aren't doing anything, the fish might be biting under the ice. I just stared at him until he looked away, flushing. But that planted the seed. Jack alone, or maybe with Emily, at his isolated cabin by the lake in the dead of winter. The perfect scene for a tragedy. I knew that cabin well. We'd spent a few weekends there together in better times. Old place built in the 60s by his late father. The dock out back was already rickety years ago. The lake would be half frozen by late December, and the county's understaffed sheriffs wouldn't look too hard at a simple accidental drowning or exposure case. especially not if there were any signs Jack had been drinking, and I was sure he would be. He'd taken to keeping a flask in his desk from the whiff I caught on him now and then. I could see it so clearly. Jack slips off his unstable dock at night, perhaps breaking something in the fall, plunges into the icy lake with no one around to hear him yell. Alcohol in his system would make it even easier for his body to succumb. By the time anyone realizes he's missing, he'd be a popsicle under the ice. A freak accident, everyone would say. What a sad, avoidable tragedy. And Emily? If I orchestrated it right, Emily would blame herself. Maybe he'd be out there because he thought she'd join him. Maybe the last thing he did was argue with her or get a message from her that lured him outside. I could manage that, I was sure. As a doctor, I had the scientific mind for this. As a scorned husband, I had the motivation. It was time to bring the hammer down. In mid-December, as the first heavy snow fell, I quietly made some purchases. A few tools at a hardware store one town over where nobody knew me. Dark clothing, even a cheap prepaid phone in case I needed untraceable communication. I doubted I'd need that last one, but better to be safe. Emily was still out of town, and I wasn't even sure if she and Jack were talking much. I did notice Jack leaving the clinic early a couple of times with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed, tense tones, probably to her. So perhaps they were arguing, or at least trying to figure out their fractured situation. It didn't matter for my plan. Whether she came to the cabin or not, I could work with it. On December 23rd, I overheard Jack telling Martha that he'd be heading to the cabin tomorrow afternoon, and off through Christmas. He even forced a pleasant "Merry Christmas" to me at day's end, which I answered with a cool nod. I spent that night preparing. My alibi was simple: Christmas Eve alone at home. I arranged with Bill, who by now knew better than to ask how I was really doing. We spoke of nothing but superficial things, to swap vehicles for the night, under the pretext that I wanted to take his pickup to haul some donated firewood to the church. He didn't bat an eye. That gave me an old gray truck that no one would think twice about seeing, and which wasn't immediately recognizable as mine. I also invited my elderly neighbors, the Coopers, over for a quick cup of holiday punch around 5 p.m. On Christmas Eve. The sweet couple was delighted, and their brief visit ensured at least 2 upstanding citizens could say they saw me home that evening. The pizza delivery I ordered for 7 p.m. provided another witness. I chatted up the delivery kid cheerfully, wishing him a Merry Christmas, ensuring I stuck in his memory. By 8 p.m., my house was dark and silent, my red sedan conspicuously parked in the driveway for any passerby to note, and I was gone, slipping away in Bill's inconspicuous pickup, dressed in black and carrying a duffel of carefully chosen tools. The drive to the cabin was about 30 minutes of snow-dusted country roads. I parked off a disused logging trail a half-mile from the cabin to avoid leaving fresh tire tracks near his property. The rest would be on foot through the woods. I remember pausing in the silent forest, the only sounds my breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot, and thinking how fitting it was that nature itself felt hushed, holding its breath for what was about to happen. Under a new moon sky, I crept to the edge of Jack's yard. The cabin was dark. He wasn't here yet. Perfect. I had perhaps an hour to get everything ready. The dock stood there in the faint glow of the stars, a hulking L shape of weathered timber extending over black water with a crust of ice along the edges. I tested one of the shoreward posts, rotten, as expected, wobbling slightly. This wouldn't take much. From my duffel, I pulled out a compact handsaw, a coil of sturdy nylon rope, and a crowbar for good measure. Working deliberately, I sawed halfway through the main support beam that held up the far end of the dock. The wood was old and soft. The saw made quick work without much noise beyond a gentle scritch-scritch. I stopped when it still held together, but only just. One good jolt and it would snap. Next, I loosened several of the planks along the middle. The nails were rusty and weak. I pried a few out entirely using the crowbar and left them looking intact but unsecured. Now, any sudden weight or movement in that area would knock them free. Finally, I tied one end of the rope to the compromised support beam and ran the line into the brush on the opposite side of the narrow inlet. I tested it. One firm yank, and the beam gave an ominous crack. I eased off. I didn't want to collapse it prematurely, I just needed it primed. I hid the rope under leaves, trailing the end to a spot where I planned to hide. Everything was set. My heart was pounding, but I was steady. As I made my way back toward the logging road, the night suddenly lit up briefly with two glowing orbs through the trees, headlights swinging down the cabin's access lane. I hurried into cover, ducking behind a shed about 50 yards from the dock. Jack's truck rumbled into his yard and parked. He stepped out, slamming the door, his silhouette briefly illuminated by the interior light. He wasn't alone. On the passenger seat, I glimpsed what looked like a bouquet of flowers and a wrapped present. My stomach turned. So he thought Emily might come after all, or he was pathetically playing the romantic even by himself. He shut off the engine and music that had been playing, Silent Night, ironically. The yard plunged back into darkness except for his flashlight beam cutting through the night. I tensed, hoping he wouldn't inspect the dock too closely before I sprung the trap. But no, he had other priorities first. He trudged up the porch and went inside, likely to turn on heat and lights, maybe pour himself a drink. I waited, breath steaming in the frigid air. After a few minutes, I saw lights flick on inside the cabin's front windows. Jack re-emerged onto the porch, now without his coat, must have cranked up the space heater. I watched as he peered out toward the driveway, then pulled out his phone. A faint chime. He likely sent a text. Probably to Emily, something like, "I'm here, where are you?" Right on cue, the phone in my pocket vibrated. Jack texting Emily's number, which I possessed. I took it out carefully, shielding the light, and checked the message. Jack, here at the cabin. Brought your favorite wine. You on your way? Winky face emoji. Time to stir the pot. I had already drafted a reply earlier. Emily, me. Running late, sorry. Mom being a pain. I'll leave in 20. Meanwhile, why don't you get the dock ready for a little game? I hit send. Across the yard, I heard Jack's phone ping. He read it, and even from my distance, I could sense his eagerness. The fool? He pocketed his phone, grabbed the flashlight again, and headed down toward the water. I silently trotted through the trees to the far side of the inlet where my rope end waited. Jack stepped onto the dock, sweeping his flashlight around as if looking for someone. The beam skittered across the trees. I pressed low to avoid it, and then onto the water. He walked further out. I could hear the hollow thunk of his boots on the loose planks I'd tampered with. The dock gave a tiny wobble. Jack paused. "Emily?" he called softly. Hearing only the lake's soft burble, he kept moving, stepping right to the spot above my half-sawed support beam. My pulse thundered in my ears. Almost. Almost. He stopped near the end, probably puzzled that no one was there. He pulled out his phone again, likely to text her for an update. I decided to improvise a little distraction. From my hiding spot across the inlet, I tossed a handful of pebbles I'd collected, lobbing them so they rained onto the far end of the dock behind Jack. He whirled at the noise, taking 2 steps back toward shore, exactly the wrong direction. I seized the rope with both hands and yanked with every ounce of strength. The weakened support beam snapped with a report like a gunshot. The dock heaved violently. With a thunder of cracking timber, the entire far section where Jack stood collapsed, dumping him and a tangle of planks into the black, frigid water. "What? No!" Jack's shout echoed once before he hit the lake with a tremendous splash. For a moment there was chaos. Water splashing, wood clattering, Jack gasping in shock. I dropped the rope and peered through the reeds. There, his head and arms broke the surface amid pieces of dock. He was coughing, sputtering. "Help!" he cried instinctively, then, Emily!" I stayed crouched, heart hammering but resolve steady. Jack tried to grab onto a floating plank. The entire structure of the dock was sagging. Half of it had detached and fallen with him, the rest angled down, still loosely attached to shore. I saw him latch onto a jutting board with one hand, kicking his legs. But one foot appeared to be caught in wreckage, exactly as I had planned by leaving nails and boards askew. He was trapped from the knee down under debris and struggling to pull himself free while keeping his upper body above water. "Help! Someone!" he yelled again, voice cracking with panic. I watched coldly from the shadows. He was strong, yes, but even a strong man can't fight cold water for long. The temperature tonight was well below freezing. That lake was liquid ice. Already his movements seemed labored. Jack's breathing turned to high, desperate pants. He screamed again, the word dissolving into a guttural groan as he tried and failed to haul himself onto the slanted remains of the dock. The wood was slick and rimed with ice. He couldn't get purchase. I allowed myself to step a little closer along the bank, still concealed by darkness. Now I could see his face dimly lit by his flashlight bobbing in the water nearby, eyes wide with terror, teeth chattering. He looked utterly bewildered at this sudden turn of fate. "Please," he shouted to the empty night. "God, help! Anybody!" I felt a grim satisfaction. The lake, of course, answered with silence. He flailed again, making a last attempt to pull his leg free. I heard him sob in pain or frustration. "No, no, no," he whimpered, clinging to a broken post. Little by little, his strength ebbed. The splashes grew weaker, the pleas quieter. I checked my watch. The entire ordeal had lasted maybe 4 or 5 minutes. In this water, hypothermia would be setting in fast. Sure enough, Jack's next cry was slurred, Eily, help!" He still thought perhaps that she might appear. In his confusion, maybe he imagined this was some accident she'd eventually discover and save him from. Heartless as it sounds, I almost wish she were here to witness this. The ultimate consequence of what they'd done. Jack's head dipped below the water, then resurfaced with a strangled gasp. His grip on the post was weakening. His flashlight had drifted a few yards away, its beam pointing uselessly out to deeper water. Then came a haunting sound, a whimpering, keening noise unlike any I'd heard. Jack Mitchell, reduced to a terrified child crying out for life. "Please, I don't want to die. Please." I closed my eyes for a second, absorbing that. A part of me, the doctor, the friend I once had, cringed in pity. But I steeled myself by remembering Emily's tearful face, the humiliation, the lies, everything that brought us all to this moment. Jack's fingers slipped off the post. His body, likely numb and exhausted, slid under the surface with barely a splash. A few air bubbles gurgled up, bursting in the beam of the floating flashlight. Then all was still. I waited. 1 second, 5, 10. The bubbles stopped. Jack did not reappear. A heavy weight settled in my chest, but I realized it wasn't guilt or regret. It was an immense, profound release. The long months of anguish and anger finally broke, washing out of me in a shuddering breath. It was done. He was done. I did a careful scan of the area. Only the ruined dock and Jack's empty truck, the driver's door still ajar, bore witness to what happened. I waded calf-deep into the icy shallows on my side of the inlet and retrieved the flashlight and rope, wiping away any sign of the ladder on the broken beam where it had been tied. The flashlight I clicked off and tossed back. Near Jack's partially submerged foot, letting it sink slowly where hopefully it would be lost in muck or at least assumed to have dropped during his struggle. Shivering now from the cold, I retreated into the woods. I made my way back toward the truck as quickly and quietly as possible. Once at the logging road, I peeled off my outer layer of clothes, damp from splashes, and sealed them in a garbage bag along with the saw and crowbar. In the cab, I toweled off and changed into regular jeans and a sweater. If by some remote chance I got stopped on the way home, I'd just be Dr. Lawson coming back from a late house call, not a man dressed for skullduggery. The drive home was uneventful and felt strangely dreamlike. I kept expecting to feel some crushing wave of emotion, panic, remorse, maybe euphoria, but I felt almost empty, calm. I pulled into my driveway a little after 10 p.m. The Cooper's lights next door were already out. The whole street was dark and peaceful. I parked Bill's truck behind my house where it wouldn't easily be seen, then went inside, turning on my living room lights like I'd been home a while. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table and waited. And waited. I wasn't sure for what. Perhaps for reality to hit, or for some instinct of self-preservation to make me start trembling at what I'd just done. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized the main thing I felt was relief. Simple, quiet relief. My phone lit up with a text alert. I jolted, irrationally thinking it might be Jack for a split second. But of course it wasn't. It was a news notification. In the sluggish, detached state of my mind, I read it 3 times before it sunk in. Winter storm. Warning, heavy snow, and high winds expected overnight through Christmas Day. Snow. That would actually help cover any tracks out at the lake. Not that anyone would likely look for footprints or tire marks in an accident scenario, but still, before going to bed, I composed one more message on Emily's phone to send in the morning to one of her friends in town. A friend who I knew had loose lips. The text read, "I'm really worried. Jack went to his cabin last night after we argued, and now he's not answering. I think I messed up so bad, I don't know what to do. I saved it to send later and powered off the phone. Then I turned in for the night, surprisingly able to fall asleep within minutes. A deep, dreamless sleep that I hadn't experienced in months. Christmas morning dawned gray and silent under a thick blanket of snow. The news of Jack's demise didn't break until later in the day, when he failed to show up at his sister's house as expected, and they sent a local deputy to check the cabin. It was almost anticlimactic to see the official word spread. Influential local doctor dies in apparent accident. The details were sparse, but by the day after Christmas everyone knew. Dr. Jack Mitchell's body had been found in Lake Haven, entangled in the wreckage of his old dock. It looked like he slipped and fell through the ice. Blood tests would later show alcohol in his system. I suspected that. An empty whiskey bottle had been found in his truck, the gossip mill said. There was even some speculation that maybe he'd done it intentionally, suicide, since he'd been so down lately. Others staunchly said no, it had to be an accident, but maybe he had too much to drink and got careless. No one mentioned foul play. There was simply no reason to. Emily, I learned, had indeed stayed in Pittsburgh, but she returned to Greenwood as soon as she got word. I didn't see her. I imagine she was too mortified to face me or anyone else. I did hear she was questioned gently by the police, who had heard from a friend that Emily was worried after a fight. She apparently told them through sobs that they had argued on Christmas Eve, and she'd told him she wouldn't come to the cabin after all, and that he must have gone out to the dock alone, maybe upset. The officers offered polite condolences and didn't pry further. A tragic accident, nothing more. When I saw Emily at Jack's brief memorial service in early January, there was no funeral. He was cremated quietly. She looked hollow and pale, as if a piece of her had died in that lake too. She avoided my eyes, and I avoided her entirely. There was nothing to say. I stood by, the picture of somber respect, as people paid their respects and murmured how terrible it all was. I caught snippets. He just hadn't been himself, so sad. And first his reputation, then this, poor fella. And even the occasional karma, maybe. He wasn't the man we thought, having an affair and all. I neither encouraged nor shied away from such talk. Let them think what they would. By then, I was already halfway out the door of Greenwood. The new year saw me moving to Fairhope as planned, opening my new clinic with Sandra by my side and a full roster of patients who'd followed me. I sold the Maple Street bungalow and all its memories and bought a smaller, modern condo near my new workplace. I even got a new dog, a rescue mutt named Rex, to keep Scout company. Life settled into a steady rhythm again. Sometimes on cold winter nights I find myself awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. And my mind drifts to Greenwood, to that lake and the secrets it holds beneath its frozen surface. I think of Jack's final moments, of Emily's shattered expression at the memorial, of the person I was a year ago versus who I became. Do I feel guilt? No, not guilt. Perhaps a piece of my soul was blackened by what I'd done, but it was a price I paid willingly. I feel no remorse. Maybe that part of me died the day I discovered their affair. In Greenwood, folks whispered that I was doing so well considering what happened, that I was strong to pick up and start over. Some even hinted that it was good I left town, with all those painful memories. They imagined me as a victim who overcame tragedy. They'll never know how much I engineered that tragedy. One crisp evening, nearly a year after it all began, I stood on the back deck of my new home, watching the sun set in hues of gold and crimson. Inside, I could hear Scout and Rex playfully barking, chasing each other around. I felt calm, lighter than I had in a long, long time. I thought of Emily then. I'd heard she sold her boutique business and moved away, possibly out west to start fresh. Good. I hoped I'd never see her again. Whatever lonely road life put her on now was of her own making. As for me, I was grateful to be on my own path, one unburdened by betrayal or anger. I had purged those toxic elements from my life thoroughly and without compromise. They say vengeance is a bitter poison, that it corrodes the soul. But for me, vengeance was the medicine I needed, the only cure for the sickness of betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. It was a long, bitter course of treatment, to be sure, but I took it to the last dose. Now, here I stand, whole again on the other side. I turned and went back inside to join my dogs, locking the twilight behind me. The night was dark, but my path was clear. At long last, I felt at peace. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.